I saw a post, I don't know, a month or so ago, and someone was asking a cartridge selection deal, and they were wanting to know whether they should run a 6.5 Creed or a 6.5 PRC and what people thought. And it intrigued me because I run a 6.5 PRC when I run teams with Dan, and it's fantastic. And I got into I started kind of perusing through the comments, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, don't shoot a PRC. That's so dumb. Why would you do it?" And da 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 da. Well, I wanna kind of pose a counter argument of, if you shoot a 6.5 Creed that is the bare minimum to meet power factor, you are setting yourself up with the bare minimum ballistics to go compete with. So it really kind of depends on, like I said, what your strengths are as a shooter and what you're trying to get out of it. Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to Red, White, and Moose, the show dedicated to the relentless pursuit of excellence, whether it's behind a trigger, in the field, or just in our everyday lives. Everything we do demands precision. That precision is backed by the best in the industry. This show is brought to you by Alpha Munitions, Foundation, Collis, West Texas Ordnance, Hawkins Precision, Lone Peak, Raven Rifles, and Botnia Solutions. So, guys, getting into this episode, the last couple of weeks we've been, kind of covering some NRL stuff. I've been getting a bunch of messages. You guys are liking that, and so I wanted to do. So I'm doing a lot of prep right now, getting ready for a match at the end of the month, and so kind of like walking through, honestly, beginning to end of like how I prep for a match is, and especially with a new rifle, and then kind of, what I plan and what I'm looking for as I get to the match and work through stages, and really just try and give like a deep dive into, like, honestly, all the kind of tips and tricks I can think of for NRL. And I'm not going to say this is the best way or the only way, but it definitely works for me, and I do pretty good in NRL. So hopefully it helps you guys out. And yeah, I kind of want to start with gear. So I showed this rifle off. It's this one right here on the wall. This is the one that I'm going to be taking at the end of the month. So it's and mainly just so y'all know. So it's a Lone Peak 338 Fusion Titanium with a switch lug from West Texas Ordnance on a Bartlin 1 in 9. I believe it's a medium Palma barrel, chambered in 300 Norma, and it's got a Botnia Maxi on the end of it with Hawkins, a bottom metal, Hawkins heavy rings, a Collis K540, sitting in a Foundation Gideon with a Bixen Andy Dakota set at like 14 ounces, I believe. And then right now I've got a Atlas PSR bipod on it. I'll probably run the triple pull for the match because without the bipod, it's like 12 and a half pounds. So I've got plenty of room for open heavy to run the triple pull. But that's the rifle. And then we'll get into all the gear. But so kind of my process with like making sure barrels are broken in and everything. So with this one being a Norma, I'm not gonna shoot as many rounds, but my goal is to get about 100 rounds through it for it to be broken in. Generally, like my rule of thumb for like normal, like standard short action, standard bolt face cartridges like Creedmoors and stuff like that, my rule of thumb is 200 rounds before I like start doing low development or confident that it's broken in and sped up and all that. On Magnums, it just generally doesn't take as much, and I'm not trying to toast most of the barrel life on just breaking it in. But and this is do whether or not you want to do this too, but I hate breaking in barrels, like as far as the like shoot clean, that process. I've done it. I've done it where you shoot one clean, shoot one clean, shoot one clean, shoot three clean, shoot three clean, and so on and so forth, and it takes forever, and I hate doing it. And then I kind of, and honestly, just kind of from being lazy and not wanting to do it, I kept kind of slowly doing less and less and not seeing a difference in how the barrels performed. And then I got to where I would just go shoot 200 rounds through them and then bring it back and clean it and start low development. And that's what I've done for probably the last, I don't know, 15, 20 barrels or something like that. And I haven't had any issues, and they all shoot really good. So take that for what it's worth, whether you want to do that or not, up to you. But it has saved me a lot of time, and I hate cleaning like that. So, but right now on this one, I've got like 50, 60 rounds through it so far. I'll get some more and get it broken in, and then get into low development. And generally my standard that I like to have is I want whatever I'm shooting to hold half a minute of vertical dispersion or less at distance. So at 1,000 yards, that's 5 inches of less of vertical, and that sits really good. And generally it's less than that, or quite a bit less than that. Uh, that's really what I'm shooting for. I think I'm gonna end up running probably the Burger 220s for the match this month. We'll see once I get to testing with it, but I think that's what I'm gonna run. And mainly, and then I've been freaking hitting it hard on PT, and getting back from the knee surgery. And so if you're new to the show, I had knee surgery 2 weeks ago. I actually got my stitches out today and trying to push it and get back to normal for the match by the end of this month. And so far, so good. It's not as fast as I would like for it to be, but it is getting better and better. So kind of getting into a little bit more of the gear. So you've seen the rifle, and so most of these rifles that are on the wall are NRL setups. So the one on top is what I've run in the past for open lights and teams, and then last year, this one in the Revelation, I ran in open heavy, and then now I'll be running this one in open heavy, and then this one is new. It's chambered in 22 saw, so it doesn't meet power factor for NRL, but I'm working on. I'll be getting some other barrels for this one, and we'll have some fun with that one. But so, and if you're new to NRL or you don't know what power factor is, so there's a minimum power factor of 380,000, and all that means is you take how much your bullet weighs times the velocity in feet per second that you're shooting, and that number has to be 380,000 or higher, which essentially means if you pretty much the smallest thing you can run is a 25 Creed, like running, 134s, 135s, 138s at a pretty decent speed. You're going to need a little bit longer barrel, or most people just run a 6.5 Creed. Before, and we'll kind of delve into cartridge selection here in a minute, but I want to go ahead and do a quick run through of everything that I use for NRL, and kind of why I like to use that. So getting into it, I've showed you guys this before, but this is the tripod that I like to run. It's a Really Right Stuff TVC 22i. This is the full size 2-piece inverted. It is, in my opinion, the most stable, solid shooting tripod that you can get, and it's very quick to deploy. So if you haven't seen the inverted tripods, the knuckles are up here at the top. You can loosen, slide down, tighten, and your hand never has to leave the collar. And so it just makes it very quick to adjust and deploy. And I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'3", and so whenever I get up to a stage, I can just pull the legs out, and it's the perfect height for me to glass off of and take a kneeling shot with supported, like getting my elbow down. But I really really like this tripod. I do think for matches, and I mean I take this hunting too, so don't think it's a match only tripod, but the 2-piece inverted tripods are going to naturally be the sturdiest tripod to shoot off of, because the legs are thicker, and generally, you're going to get way more stable, less twisting, less torsion, stuff like that. And then I am running the Anvil 30 head on it for those that are curious. And then I have another one. It's a Really Right Stuff 34L. I wanted something else that does collapse smaller than this one. And then I've got the BH55 ball head on that one. And let's see, the SCR head. It's the kind of the same thing with the Arca Picatinny clamp. And I use that one for photography, and then I'll have another one for like if I need something smaller. It is heavier, but the ball head is pretty heavy, and you don't have to have Really Right Stuff. I get it, they are expensive, but they are freaking phenomenal. But I do really enjoy them. And then this is one that I really enjoyed. So this is the Armageddon gear. This is the Big Game bino harness. It's a wax canvas bino harness, and the back plate on it is nice and wide, really big. It's got its mesh line, so it breathes really well. And I got this, honestly, I got it pretty quick after they released it. So Armageddon Gear has been doing really expanding their hunting line, and for my like all a lot of people that listen to the show are competitors and stuff like that. If you haven't looked at the Armageddon Gear hunt line, it's pretty impressive. Their chest rigs and their gun cases and slings and bags and stuff like that. It's really nice. And for those that aren't competitors and just hunters, I highly recommend it. It's just kind of good quality stuff. But this is a wax canvas harness, and I think I've been running this for 2 years, something somewhere right in there. And I mean, you can tell it still looks fantastic, and I've laid on it hundreds of times, and it's nasty. It's gotten nasty and beat up, and that's why I like this wax canvas stuff. It holds up really well. And you can see I've got just like a little wind indicator in here if I need to check wind. And then generally on my tripod, I'll just have like a couple feet long piece of flagging tape hanging from the bottom hook, just as a quick reference for wind direction, and that helps a lot. And then generally, I like if I'm hunting, I'll just keep my Kestrel in this side pocket. For matches, I have a couple of these Kydex holsters from Short Action Precision. So I have their Kestrel mag or Kestrel holder, and then I have a mag pouch as well from them that I just keep clipped on my belt, and it's just easy to get to. I do need to figure something out for the Norma mags because they're giant, but I absolutely love this bino harness. I would highly recommend people checking it out because I see them, but I don't see just a ton of them. And then this is the tack plate that I run on my tripod. This is the Gray Ops. I believe it's the Elite plate is what they call it. It is a very nice tack plate. It's got these adjustable portions so it's got two sections that you can clamp ARCA stuff into. So like if you want to run like binos in a rangefinder or something like that, and it's got, threaded holes and stuff like that. It's way overkill for what NRL is, but it's an expensive tack plate, and I'm not going to buy another one just to have another one. But it is a good option if you need something that's more than just a tack plate. If you want something just a little more basic, like the ones that Rytech is making now are really solid and pretty inexpensive. But I like to run this on a tripod. And so then I just put a bag on top of the plate, and I can glass off of it. And then when I'm done glassing, I can just pull the binos off and put my gun on and shoot off the bag. That's my personal preference. It works really. It's very quick, and I can still get very stable shooting off of it. And because I've shot PRS and positionally so much, it's not really a big deal just to shoot off a bag. Or you can clip into your tripod. I see tons of guys that do that. I think it's a little bit more of a personal preference on that front, but I prefer to just shoot off a bag. And when I'm glassing off of it, and especially out here in West Texas, I can just put them on a bag and pull down and get some pressure on it and like get the shake out of my binos and my glass and stuff like that. Especially when you're trying to range, if you got kind of that shimmer or vibration in there, it's going to be pretty hard to get a good range, and being able to put some pressure on it definitely helps. And then I take 2 bags for NRL. You don't have to. It's my preference. I've been running the Wee Bad Tater Tots. So this is the one with the glass fill. And it's a heavy fill. Like, it weighs like 10 or 11 pounds. This is the primary one that I use when I'm glassing and or shooting positionally, just because this heavy fill is very, very, very stable. And if you want just one bag, this is a great option, but I prefer to use this light one for a rear bag when I'm shooting prone. And it's the exact same bag, but it weighs like 1.5 pounds and is very, very light. And so this is the one I take when I go hunting, because obviously I don't want to carry a 10-pound bag around in the woods for fun. But this one does work good when you need it, but it works fantastic as a rear bag. And then this is one a lot of people try to go down the rabbit hole for range finding binos, and rightfully so. It's something that you're using on every stage. I run the Swaro EL ranges. These are the 10 powers. I went down this rabbit hole pretty hard last year looking at all of the different options that were out, and landed on these, and I absolutely love them. There's been a couple new sets that were released at SHOT Show this year that I from other companies that I am interested to see how they do. Loophole and Vortex released some pretty interesting binos, but I haven't gotten a chance to mess with them yet. But I do absolutely love these EL ranges. The glass is fantastic. The laser is pretty dang good. It's not the best laser out there. Um, as far as excuse me, as far as like being able to range further distances, this isn't the strongest thing in the world, but I can consistently range stuff. I mean, I would say like 11, 12, 1300 yards, pretty much all the time. If the conditions are right, I can get about a mile, which is honestly everything I could really ask for out of these. But like the Vector X's and the SIGs can definitely range stuff further. Whether or not that's important to you, that's really kind of up to you. I do like some of so the ELs have their own ballistic software from Swaro. And I do like it. I think it's very easy to get everything to line up and true out my data, but I do wish it came with applied ballistics. It is what it is. I'm going to stand on that mountaintop until they do it. But it is. And then you definitely don't have to have this exact one, but I run an arm board. I'm trying to check the brand. It's like Sun something tactical. I'm trying to see. I can't remember Sun something, but I believe I got this from Short Axe and Precision. I'm pretty sure it's on their website. But it's just a simple arm board. But the thing I like is I can put cards on the top and bottom, and then so you can see I have just blue tape across here. So the way I set it up is, and I'll get into this more, but I run a dope card on the top that goes from 200 yards to 925 yards every 25 yards. And then I've got a column for elevation, and then a 5 mile an hour, 10 mile an hour, and 15 mile an hour wind. And the top card is a 3 o'clock wind, and the bottom card is a 9 o'clock wind. And that's mainly in case it's really windy. And I want to be able to make sure I'm accounting for aerodynamic jump or something like that if it's windy and a skinny target or something like that, or I just want to be able to verify that what I'm ranging in the data is it's my binos are spitting out is on track. And then I've got wind for both directions to account for spin drift at all the different distances for when we're shooting very narrow targets. And then last but not least, I run this Kuyu. This is the Venture 2300 backpack. They discontinued this one. They've got a couple new models that are pretty similar, but it's just a small backpack. It's kind of tall, skinny, and as you can tell, there's really not all that much gear that you have to carry around for NRL. And so you don't need a giant backpack, and you don't need like 1,000 bags and all these like random doodads and gadgets and stuff like that. So, and then I just strap my tripod to the side of that. And when I can get up to a stage, I'll just sling my backpack off one shoulder, unclip it, grab my tripod, and I can dump my backpack and get into my bags and stuff pretty quick. And then depending on what cartridge I'm shooting, I've got a couple ammo novels or just ammo boxes that I'll keep in the bottom. But so that's kind of the gear rundown, and thankfully it's a fairly short list. So I mean, when you get into competitions, there is just, it's kind of the nature of the beast. There is a lot of gear driven stuff. And I know that's what a lot of people like to nerd out on. I'm a gear junkie. I do think it's a lot of fun. It's not near as gear heavy as something like PRS, where, like the backpack I carry for PRS is like 2.5 times that size, and it's completely full. And I've got different bags and, a bunch of different stuff for all the random scenarios that PRS creates. And but the downside to like NRL is like you have to, in my opinion, you have to have range finding binos, which get expensive very quickly. You have to have a tripod, and then when you start getting into components like rifle components to make stuff light, it just also gets expensive. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It kind of depends on which way you look at it. If you're and we'll get into the classes a little bit, but if you go into open heavy, it's not as bad. I'm trying to get into like specific materials and stuff like that, like carbon fiber and magnesium and some things like that. But it is what it is. Like, but the light stuff is very fun, and that's what we're hunting with and taking out into the field. And this show is partnered with Collis. Collis is the world's oldest successful rifle scope manufacturer, so it's no surprise with that many years of experience, they've released their game-changing lineup. The K328i and the K540i truly are game changers. With a 40% wider field of view, they make a huge difference in competition and in the field. I love the DLR models with the easy to read elevation turrets, and they've got top tier glass that provides the ultimate color and clarity. When you're ready to be at the top of your game, you need a game-changing scope from Collis. Check out the K328 and K540i. This episode is brought to you by Foundation Stocks. I've been using Foundation's micarta line of stocks for years, and now with their new hybrid line combining micarta, carbon fiber, and Kevlar, you get that dead recoil impulse that their competition stocks have been known for, now in a lightweight hunting rifle that's light enough to take into the woods. I've been running their Centurion and Samson and Revelation, and now I have their Ezekiel and Gideon stocks, and I absolutely love them. Feel less and see more with Foundation stocks. This show is partnered with Raven Rifles. Raven Rifles produces artwork that shoots. Their custom Lurk Cerakote pattern provides depth and colors that honestly most patterns just dream of. Their limited release rifles are truly a work of art. They're available in limited numbers and guaranteed to be an eye catcher. I absolutely love the Lurk pattern. You can see the Snow Wolf and Copperhead patterns on the rifles behind me. They just truly become functional works of art. When you're looking to stand out above the rest, check out Raven Rifles. For those that are new to NRL, so there's a handful of different classes. There's factory, which means you're shooting a factory rifle, and there's like a certain like approved list of manufacturers on the NRL website. They have to meet a few criteria to be there, but that list is pretty easily accessible. By far the most popular one is the Seekins, the new PH3. They're pretty fantastic rifles for factory guns. And then there's open light, which essentially means there's no gear restrictions, just everything, your rifle with everything on it, meaning bipod, scope, rings, levels, if you're running a timer, whatever, everything that attaches to the rifle except for a mag and a sling has to be 12 pounds or under. And then open heavy is the same thing, but it's 16 pounds and under. And then new this year, there's a couple of contingencies if you're running a suppressor versus a brake. I believe you get that credit in open light and factory, but not open heavy. And I think it's a 10 ounce. So your gun can weigh 12 pounds, 10 ounces, whatever. It's not my favorite thing. I run the freaking heaviest brakes on the market and make weights with everything. So it is what it is. But that does exist this year. And then there's skills, which essentially means you get a lower priced entry into the match. And you don't have to make power factor. You don't have to make weight. So like if you wanted to show up with a PRS rifle or you wanted to show up with, whatever gun it is that you have sitting in your safe, you can do that. And then you can get coached on the clock. And so you can ask your ROs questions. They can help, point you in the right directions for targets. They can help you do whatever you want. You get kind of a personal little coach on the clock. So it's meant to help and entice new people to get in. The only thing, if you are in skills, you don't get to walk the prize table at the end of the match. That is reserved for the people that are competing and paid full price for the match. And then they've got seniors and ladies and some other divisions and things like that. But those are the main classes that everybody goes through. And then I do want to spend a moment on cartridge selection. So there's the Facebook page for NRL that's pretty solid. Pretty much a lot of the people that are active in NRL are on that page, but there are also a lot of people that aren't active in it that kind of, It is what it is, but that is a good page, like, if you wanna keep up with some news that's going on in NRL. But talking about cartridge selection, I see it gets asked a million times on that page and on every YouTube video and match and stuff like that of, like, what cartridge should I run and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, I bet 90% of the people that show up to a match will be shooting a 6.5 Creed because for the most part, that's the smallest thing that you can meet power factor with and have the least amount of recoil. All of that is true, but I do want people to kind of think maybe outside the box a little bit on that because it depends on what your strengths are as a shooter. If you struggle with recoil control and being able to see your impacts and see your misses and driving the rifle with a 6.5 Creed, I wouldn't go any bigger. I would continue to work on, being able to control that recoil and see everything that you need to see. But I saw a post, I don't know, a month or so ago, and someone was asking a cartridge selection deal, and they were wanting to know whether they should run a 6.5 Creed or a 6.5 PRC and what people thought. And it intrigued me because I run a 6.5 PRC when I run teams with Dan, and it's fantastic. And I started kind of perusing through the comments, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, don't shoot a PRC. That's so dumb. Why would you do it?" And da 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 da. Da. Well, I wanna kind of pose a counter argument of if you shoot a 6.5 Creed that is the bare minimum to meet power factor, you are setting yourself up with the bare minimum ballistics to go compete with. So it really kind of depends on, like I said, what your strengths are as a shooter and what you're trying to get out of it. Now, I'm not saying go shoot a 300 normal like I am for this match because there's a whole thing with that. But so the main one that I've competed with is a seven saw, and the people that know me know I love the seven saw from WTO. When I show up with a seven saw, I'm generally in the top 5 people of highest power factor at that match. And I'm generally like 440,000, something like that. And there'll always be like a guy that shows up with a 300 PRC or a 7 PRC or 300 Win Mag or something like that is higher. But the seven saw is ballistically superior, and you're going to get more energy on target, better BC, better speeds, higher bullet weight, all the things with a very, very, very minimal increase in recoil. And so I tell people, like, if you can drive a 6.5 Creed efficiently and see everything that you need to see, you can shoot a seven saw the same, and you'll just be able to gain a little bit more out of it, out of like what you're shooting. Now, not to say seven saw is the only answer. I've had friends start shooting some 25 saws, which are pretty cool. But then, like I said, I shoot the 6.5 PRC. I've shot that a couple times, and I'll be taking the Norma. And then I'm this knee surgery kind of screwed up my schedule for what I was planning for NRL. So I need to find another one that I'm gonna do because we've got the Cactus Classic at the end of this month, and then we're hosting the Dust Devil Duel at the end of April, which obviously I'm not shooting, but I'll be there. And then I'd like to find at least one more to make, and I really want to try and maybe shoot like a 7 PRC or something like that. I just haven't decided yet, but it's something to think about. And I obviously, like, I know when we're talking, hunting rifles or hunting, hybrid hunting competition setups, we're obviously dealing with lighter rifles. So with that is going to be more recoil, but you can still set up your gun to balance well. I like to run brakes. That's why I run the Botnias when I compete because the recoil reduction is insane. I posted a video on my Instagram like a week ago shooting the Norma with the Botnia, and it's kind of nuts how little it moves. So, it take a look into it. Kind of deep dive into like what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. But and if you're just, if you're the average guy or like you're just trying to, improve your skills, for going hunting and stuff like that, don't worry about it. Just bring a 6.5 Creed. It's going to do everything that you need to do. But if it's something that you are trying to go from like mid pack to the top, or you're trying to find kind of every little edge that you can get, I would I would recommend maybe looking at something bigger than a Creed. Or if you are going to run a Creed, maybe run some of the heavies like the 153 A tips or the 153 5 burgers or the 156 burgers. All those will, get a little bit extra over just like a standard 140. But it's something that, everyone asks constantly, but hopefully that kind of helps, at least my opinion on cartridge selection. But then, so getting into like match prep and like what I'm looking for. So the big thing is you need to have your data trued up and have everything rocking and rolling at, at distance between what your gun is shooting, what your Kestrel is telling you, and what your binos are telling you. And so I'm not going to get like super deep into like how to true up your ballistics. That can be a totally different topic. But my first step will be, once, if you're hand loading, making sure, I've got my load lined out, or if you're shooting factory ammo, just making sure, everything's shooting good and you've got good speeds and good dispersion at distance and stuff like that. And then getting all of that lined up with your Kestrel or whatever ballistic solver that you're using. I like Kestrels. That's what I like to use. Um, and then getting all of that data to line up into your binos. And depending on what system you're using, there's some new like Bluetooth deals. And if you're running like AB across multiple softwares, it'll all link up really easy. But if you're not running something like that, like what I am, so I'll get on my Swaro app and I'll enter all of my ammo data, my BC, my velocity, my scope offset, all the stuff that it asks for. And then I'll go through and enter the environmentals. And I'll do that for like when I go check uh, when I'm shooting at distance with my rifle, I'll get all the environmentals on my Kestrel so that when I come back to the shop, I have all that saved, and then I can just copy that into my Bino app and then make sure it starts lining up. And generally, it's a little off, and I think at least on the Swaro app, I think there's something with the density altitude calculation that they use that is just like a hair off from like what my Kestrel is spitting out. So generally, I have to just tweak it a little bit, but it's still very quick and easy. And what I'll like to do is once I get all that inputted into my app and transferred into my binos, I'll just step outside and I'll just start ranging different things, and I'll do, try and find something at like 300 yards and something like 600 or 700 yards, and then something like a little over 1,000. And on an NRL, there's a rule that you can't have targets past 1,000. So if you get everything to line up, up to 1,000 or, just past it, you'll be really solid. And so the big thing is if it's off at 1,000 or 1,100 or whatever it is that I'm checking, I'll start tweaking the atmospheric data in my app until everything lines up. And realistically, I can get I never really have a problem getting everything to line up within a hundredth of a mil. And so I mean it's money. We're rounding significantly more than that. Something on and backtracking just a bit, when you're truing out your data on your rifle, there's a lot of theories on how to do it and da 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 da. And like I said, I'm not going to get crazy into it, but for something like PRS and NRL, because except for like a very select few PRS matches, we're rarely ever shooting past 1,000 yards. In NRL, you're never shooting past 1,000 yards. And so I tell people, don't worry about, trying to shoot at, 80 to 85% of like your supersonic range to true up your velocity and then start tweaking your BC and stuff like that. I like to run the custom curves from AB because it's just dummy simple. and it gets everything to line up really well. And when you do that, then you can just input your speed, calibrate your muzzle velocity at 1,000, and then wham bam, you're done. And I mean, I always verify coming back closer, but it always lines up. But so don't worry about trying to, true stuff out at 12, 13, 14, 1,500 yards because you're never going to shoot that far in one of these matches anyways. So it'll kind of save you a little bit of heartache and just extra ammo and some things like that. But then getting into like what I start looking, and this is just to kind of gather some information so that I'm well prepared when I get to the match. Once it starts getting about like pretty much the beginning of the week, like that Sunday, Monday that I'm going to be leaving, I'll start taking a look at the weather and see, and I'll just kind of check it every day and see mainly what the temperature is going to be, if it's going to rain, and then what the wind direction, primary wind direction is going to be, and what the wind speeds are looking at, just so I can kind of make sure I'm prepared. So then what I'll do the night before I leave, I like to use Weather Underground. There may be better options to look at, but it's always worked pretty well for me. They have a 10-day forecast on there that you can break down hour by hour. And so I'll get on there and I'll take a look at what the weather is doing from like 7 a.m. to like 3 or 4 p.m. Saturday and Sunday. And I'll just pick an average of what the temperature is going to be, humidity, wind speed, and station pressure. And then, and by the way, like the station pressures are always like adjusted for elevation. So you can just Google a station pressure calculator. And so then I'll pull the elevation for wherever it is that I'm going to go shoot, enter the station pressure that the Weather Underground gives me. It gives me the uncorrected version. And then I can plug that into my weather apps and my Kestrel and get everything lined up there. And, generally, unless like a major front is coming in or something like that, just picking an average of what it's going to do across the course of the day is going to be plenty accurate enough for what we're trying to do. We're not shooting F class and bench rest and stuff like that where you're like splitting every hair. The targets are going to be big enough, and we're positional shooting and stuff like that that you'll be able to eat up, whatever little variances you may have in there. And then so I'll have all my weather stuff from Weather Underground and got all my environmentals. Everything's all lined out. And then I'll input all of that into my Kestrel and then go to my target card, and I have it set up to spit out every 25 yards. And then I can just copy everything into that arm board that I have. And then I've got all of my data for the weekend. And then, and I forgot to mention this. So this tape that's on here, so I'll put just a bunch of strips of tape going across whenever I get to the match. And this is just kind of my notes section for when I'm on the stage. And so I'll have a Sharpie on me. And when I walk up to a stage, it'll tell you, how many targets or how many positions, what kind of animals you're looking for. If you're shooting left to right, right to left, near to far, whatever. And I'll write those notes down so I have it to reference. And then when I get on the stage and I start ranging everything, I'll just write down my data as my binos are spitting it out. And then if I need to verify, I can go into the arm board. So once I've got all the environmentals and wind stuff and all that, then generally, especially if I've never been there before, like the one at the end of this month is at a new location besides Caprock Rifle Club. And so I was actually looking at it this past weekend, and I'll just get on Google Maps and then so I'll pull up Google Maps and then I'll pull up windy.com. And the Google Maps, you can just kind of look at the terrain features. Obviously you don't know like exactly where the range is going to be or where the firing line is going to be set up and where the targets are and stuff like that. But you can look at major terrain features. So like it looks like the place that we're going to at the end of the month has a bunch of canyons and little fingers and stuff. Like it looks like there's some pretty good elevation and some interesting things. And so really that can help like if you're there's going to be a primary wind direction, but if you've got some big land feature that the wind is going to be funneling around or something like that, then you've kind of got you've already done that homework. And then once you get there, you can kind of compare what you're seeing versus what the map is showing. And then you can, compare the two and stuff like that. And then windy.com does a good job of, showing the prevailing winds in the area. So like obviously once you get to the match, what you're seeing and feeling and experiencing is going to be way more accurate wind wise than what the app is going to show. But where that is really nice is say you go somewhere that has like very, very, very little wind, or it's very wooded or very protected or something like that, where you're not getting to experience it a whole lot. And, or like maybe you're on one of the like these big terrain features, like you're on the side of this big bluff or something like that, that's, the wind is funneling both sides and you can't really quite tell what's going on. You can pull something like that up and take a look of what the actual wind is doing. But honestly, and you can do all that in, 10 minutes and just kind of get prepared going into it. Then getting into going to the match. So generally, if you're not ROing, generally check-in starts like around noon on Friday, depending on how far away the match is. I kind of like to get there middle of the afternoon so I'm not having to leave super early in the morning. I can get some stuff done here at the shop or something before I go. And then I'm also not showing up super late trying to, make sure I can get checked in before they close up. But I'll show up and I really don't like to shoot very much. I mainly just go confirm that my zero is good and it's where it should be. And if they're checking power factor at check-in, I'll go check power factor and then I'll shoot a couple of rounds at distance just to make sure, everything is still lining up how it needs to be. And I would like to really see more and more match directors on the NRL side have multiple targets at distance during check-in for shooters to verify, because we are there to compete and it very much is needed in my opinion. But it's not I don't like to just burn a bunch of rounds and, be on the firing line a ton. It's mainly because the whole goal is to have already done all this homework before you get there, and once you get there, it's just verifying. And then honestly, from there, I'll just go put everything up and hang out with people, and that's one of my favorite things about NRL is it is a cool community, and the people that show up are a lot of fun, really nice people, and we'll hang out and maybe get a game plan together for the evening. I like to it's kind of become a tradition for me and most of the guys I travel with for matches. We'll try and find something that's a good dinner for Friday night. I'll try and go find like a steak or something just good and hearty that you're putting something good into your body the night before you're going to go compete versus like shoveling. And I mean, if it is what it is, if you got to go do it, grab fast food or, do what you got to do. But if I have the opportunity, I like to try and get some good food in that night. And then, uh, generally Saturday too, just so we can, finish the weekend up strong. But I do, if you're going to be competitive, like, go get some good food. Don't stay up super late. Don't, drink a ton of beers, in the hotel or Airbnb or whatever. Like, wake up in the morning ready to go. Then, make sure you're hydrated, drink a lot of water, like leading up to it, the basics. But when you're dehydrated, your eyes get affected very quickly. And when we're searching for targets and stuff like that, you need all that to be, the best that it can be. So this episode is brought to you by West Texas Ordnance. West Texas Ordnance is a full-service custom rifle shop, and that full-service custom rifle shop is located on a 2,500-yard shooting range. It doesn't get any cooler than that. They cut all of my barrels for my hunting rifles, competition rifles, test barrels, and they are all absolute hammers. Check out their patented switch-leg system for easy, repeatable barrel swaps, or the saw line of cartridges now including the 7 saw, 22 saw, and 25 saw. From their signature series of rifles all the way to their full custom rifles, they've got you covered. Next time you get a rifle going, check out West Texas Ordnance. This show is partnered with Botnia Solutions. Botnia makes the most high-performing muzzle brakes on the market. They've got a low dust signature, so you're not getting the crap beat out of you when you're shooting prone. They've got upward-facing ports to help drive the rifle down when you're shooting positional and be able to see more through your scope. I love them. I've been running the MIDI on my hunting rifles and my NRL Hunter setup and couldn't be happier with it. And then when I need the most, I put the Maxi. I've got that on my PRS rifle. And when you need all of the recoil control that you can possibly get, look no further than Botnia Solutions. This episode is brought to you by Lone Peak Arms. Lone Peak makes absolutely amazing competition and hunting actions. Their Razor Infusion line is available in short and long action, left or right, and stainless or titanium. I've been running Lone Peaks for years, and I've run them in snowy, muddy, sandy conditions, and they just keep on ticking. Your action is the heart of your rifle, and make sure you're starting it off strong. Next rifle you get going, make sure you start it out with a Lone Peak action. Then getting into actual match weekend. So one of the biggest tips that I can give people is have a good list of questions that you can ask your ROs on stage that either you ask every stage, or like if you get into a certain situation, you already know what questions to ask. And so in NRL, you can ask your RO yes or no questions to help you progress through the stage. And so what I mean by that is, and they'll always say at the safety briefs and stuff like that, because they'll always go over this because there's new shooters and stuff like that, that you can ask them yes or no questions, but you cannot ask them leading questions. And so what I mean by that is, like, say you get up on your binos and you start glassing and there's like a creek running through the middle of this field. You can't ask the RO, hey, are all the targets on the right side of the creek? Because if they answer that with a yes or a no, it either way, it gives you a ton of information of, like, say yes, well, then you've already eliminated everything left of the stream, and it's not really fair. But what is a good question is, say, right next to that creek, on the creek bed, is a target on a T post in front of a boulder next to a mesquite, and you say, "Hey, RO, is target one on the right creek bed, about halfway down, right in front of a boulder that's next to a mesquite tree that has a fox facing right?" Well, that is very, very specific, and it can tell, and the RO can confidently answer that question for you. And I've RO'd NRL matches, and to be honest, like, I'm a very competitive person. When I go to shoot, like, I'm going to win or do as the best that I can, and I try to keep that same mindset when I'm ROing for other competitors, that they are out there to win and do the best that they can. And so when they are asking me questions, I want to make sure that the information that I'm giving them is as accurate as possible. Because if we have a misunderstanding and I say yes or no to a question that I thought they were asking something else, and then it ends up screwing them up on the stage because we didn't understand each other, it's just a bad situation for everybody. And so, like, an example of something like that, when I IRO'd the Cactus Classic match a couple years ago, and one of the stages that I was on was a prairie dog stage, and there were four prairie dogs, and they were all spread out. So I mean, they were easily distinguishable, and you could ask good questions to separate that. But all four of them were in front of a berm. And so I would have shooters come up and say, "Hey, RO, is target one in front of a berm?" Well, they're all in front of a berm, but I can't tell you that. I can just say yes. So I don't know if you're looking at target 1, target 2, target 4. I don't know, but you did ask a generalized enough question that it is technically right, and so I'm going to tell you yes. Well, if you're looking at target 2 and I say yes and you're working left to right, then you may never find target 1. So there is some responsibility on the ROs to be paying attention and know, what's going on in the stage and be able to effectively communicate with the shooter. But I would say the vast majority of the responsibility is on the shooter to be able to communicate effectively to the RO so he knows exactly what you're asking. Because in that scenario where if you say, "Hey, is target one in front of a berm?" and I say yes, but you're looking at the wrong target, you screwed yourself. I told you the right I told you the information, and that information is correct, but you didn't give me all of the information that I needed. So, it's just something to keep in mind. Ask the right questions, and like you c and you can't ask like, hey, RO, can I see all the targets from here? Because like I'm 6'3", and if you're Taylor Crabtree and you're 5'1", you're not going to be able to freaking, we're going to be at different heights. So I don't know, just be able to think properly through all of that. But then, like what I was saying, that if you're looking at the wrong target, but a tip. So generally, all of the stages, they're going to tell you which direction you're going to be shooting the targets, and that's either going to be left to right to left, near to far, or far to near. And so it's common sense, but I do see a lot of shooters that, and I'm not knocking anybody. We all like once that timer goes off, like I get it, people forget things, but a very common one is, left to right. And say you've got 4 targets. If you're going to work left to right, that means target 1 is the furthest left. So start on the left limit. And if for those that don't know, there's a sighting stake that you're supposed to sight from, and then there is a left and a right limiter up in front of you, and all of your targets will be inside that cone. Okay. And so if you're working left to right, you need to start on the left. And if it's right to left, you need to start on the right. If it's near to far, start close. If it's far to near, start far out. And when you do that in the left to right example, you start on the left edge of your scanning area. You find your first target and you can say, hey, RO is target 1, da 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 da. And if that is the correct target, well, then you instantly know there is nothing else to the left of that because you're working left to right and you found the first target. So everything is going to be to the right. Same thing if it's near to far. Once you find that first target, nothing is going to be closer. So you can instantly eliminate all of that area in front of that first target. And then the same thing as you continue to progress through all of the targets. So keep that in mind. And so, like, a great example that I can think of from our match, the Dust Devil Duel last year, it was stage 2 for those that were there. And when you got up to your sighting position, your limiter stakes, your left and right limit, were about 6 inches apart from each other. They were very, very close. When I walk up and see something like that, I know the targets are probably going to be in a line going away from me because they can't be left of this and they can't be right of this one. So, but I would watch shooters get up and they would just start what they always do and start, left and start scanning back and forth. Well, 90% of the stuff that they're looking at isn't even inside the limiters for what they're trying to look for. And then same, if you walk up and the limiters are out, 3 feet apart from each other, don't just, scan the heck out of the middle of the field because there's going to be a ton of other stuff, on the edges. And then one of the biggest tips I can give for asking questions on the ROs is, confirming targets, but do it especially when it's a 4 target situation. Unless I can get in my glass and like instantly see all 4, I'll ask the RO on every single one. Hey, RO, is target 1, this ram next to this tree? Yes. Okay. Start scanning more. All right. Hey, RO, is this bobcat, under this branch target 2? Yes. And continue on. And so say I get to the next one and I'm like, hey, is this rabbit in front of this rock target number 3? And if they say no, okay, well, is that target number 4? Yes. Okay. Well, then I know, okay, I found target 4. I found the first 2 targets. I've missed the third one. I know where the second one is. I know where the fourth one is. It's got to be somewhere in between there. So I've eliminated everything left of target 2 and right of target 4. And then I just need to look through that area to find the third target. So you can use, start eliminating stuff pretty easily as you start working through stuff. But that's one of the biggest things I do see shooters get messed up on is they'll get out of order, or they'll mix up their targets or something. Then when they get on their gun, then it kind of becomes a shit show on the stage. But then as you're finding these targets, especially when it's a 4 target system, look for landmarks that you can, like, when you find that target in your binos, just pop your head up out of the binos and look over them, and you're perfectly in line with that target. Find something that's very quick and easily recognizable with your naked eyes. whether that's like a big boulder, a patch of rocks, bear's spot on the side of a hill, a certain tree on the horizon. It could be like a telephone pole or a wind turbine or whatever. But so that as you and remember it, don't forget it. But then as you work through finding the rest of your targets and then you get on your gun, you can just be like, all right, I got to find that telephone pole, that tree, and that rock. And then when you get in your gun, you're already pointing at it and the targets are right there. And that's something I see. And I get it. We get on the clock and we're trying to, bum, 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 bam, bam, get through everything as fast as we can. But that's going to be something. If you find all your targets in 30 seconds, but then you get on your gun and then you don't remember where any of them are, you're still screwed and trying to find them in your gun. Then you got to get your rangefinder back out and, all that stuff. So definitely, you use your landmarks and keep those in mind. Then ranging. So this is a big one that this will be one of the easiest things to get wrong in a stage. Is and so I went over it on last week's episode. So if you haven't listened to it, go listen to that one. And I kind of walk through how to find the hot spot in your reticle for your range finding binos. But you need to know exactly where that is and then put that on the target. And so kind of my MO for what I'll do when I get to a target, and it varies a little bit, depending on how far it is and what the shape of the target is and all that stuff. But if I can range the target itself, I'll range the target multiple times and just make sure I'm getting the same thing repeatedly and not a ton, but 2, 3, 4 times. And then if it's a really big target and I can fit that sucker right, my reticle, right, my hot spot right in the middle of it, and I know for sure I'm not missing, great, you've got your range, move on. That's rarely the case. And then so generally what I'll try and do is I'll start ranging around the target. So say I do, I range 2 or 3 times and I get, 501 yards. And then I'll range directly above it. Well, actually, the first thing I'll do is I'll range the base of the T-post. If you can see the base of the T-post, that is a very, very good starting point because you're hitting the ground right at the distance that the target is at. That's a good confirmation. And then, like, especially if you're on a hill or, the target's on a hill or something like that, range above it, you should get something that's like 10 to 30 yards further because you're shooting just over the target. And then you can range left and right of the target and kind of accomplish the same thing. And so, again, eliminating variables by using the information that you're given. So, say I range a couple times and I get 501, and then I range the base of the T post, I get 500 or 501 or whatever. Okay, great. I'm feeling good. I go back over the target, range over it, and I get like 520. Okay, well, now I know for sure that I'm getting 501 as a distance and I can rock and roll with that. But say, I range the base of the T post and I get the same thing, and then I range over the target and I get the same thing again. Well, now I know something's messed up because and I haven't actually hit that target for whatever reason. So then I can start playing around like, okay, maybe I need to come a little bit further down on the base of the T post, or I need to try and move, my the hot spot in my reticle a little bit to get that target. But generally you can start ranging stuff all right around it to find and eliminate what it's not. And worst case scenario, and depending on who the match director is and how it's set up, you can sometimes range the placard. So that in NRL there's a placard on the first target. Sometimes you can range that. The rule is I think the official rule is it's supposed to be within, I think it's 20 feet of the target. It's either 20 feet or 10 yards or something. It's relatively close. That will be able to get you in the realm of things. And then, worst case scenario, use your brain, think on your feet and maybe you can range a tree right next to it or a rock or something like that. And, if you can tell the rock is just like a little bit in front, whatever that range is and add a few yards or something like that. But you can really start using all of the ranges around everything to get exactly what you're needing. So then main thing I'm doing, so all NRL stages are blind, meaning you don't know where the targets are and like what you're shooting off of and stuff like that until you get on the stage. So while you're waiting, there's really nothing to do because there's nothing you can watch. And so that is one of the fun things is in your downtime, you just get to hang out with your buddies and talk and BS and stuff like that. But what I'll generally do is once I get like a shooter or two out, I'll get all my gear, get my backpack on, all that stuff. I'll want to verify I know where the wind is coming from. So if it's changing or whatever, what I'll generally try to do is I'll find where the wind direction is coming from, and then I'll find a landmark for that stage. Okay, I know the wind is coming from, this clump of trees on the horizon so that when I get up onto the stage, I can look over there and know that's where the wind is coming from. And you can get your Kestrel out, take wind readings, if you need to. If it's changing a lot, you can get an average wind speed, or if it's consistent, you already know what it is. Alpha Munitions sets the gold standard for rifle brass. Their OCD technology has been the first improvement for rifle brass in decades. I use it for hunting, competing. I use it in the business. Honestly, it's just the easy button for getting your ammo to shoot good. If you're looking to get the most out of your ammo or you want to lower your SDs, make sure you start out your ammo with a good foundation and use good quality brass. Find out why more top competitors are using Alpha Munitions brass in the PRS than any other brand. Next time you're getting your ammo started, make sure you start it out with Alpha Munitions brass. This show is partnered with Hawkins Precision. Hawkins makes precision rifle hunting components built to help you go further and shoot farther. From lightweight hunting rings to heavy tactical rings to hunter bottom metals and flush magazines, they've got you covered. I run Hawkins on all of my rifles. I've got their ultralight rings, their heavy tack rings, the cantilever mount, one piece mount for PRS, their M5 bottom metal, hunter bottom metals. I absolutely love it. I run them on everything. Next time you're getting a rifle going, make sure you finish it out with Hawkins Precision. But then and NRL has a very strict no cheating policy, which is good. I don't want people to cheat. So like you can't while you're waiting, you can't get in your binos and look down range or try and find them or range things and stuff like that. Like I do not cheat. You will get thrown out, you will get removed from a match and you won't come back. But while you're waiting, there is information that you can gather right before you get up to shoot. Like I said, you can find wind direction, you can find wind speed, but you can also listen to the dings of the targets going off, and depending on how close and the stages are next to each other and stuff like that, you can generally know which targets are being shot for your stage. Don't go look for them, just listen. And like I said, 90% of people are shooting 6.5 creeds. And so you can kind of get familiar with that time of flight, the boom, ding, boom, ding. You can kind of tell how, if they're far or close. And you're not going to get, super accurate distances or anything like that. And to be honest, it really doesn't matter all that much, but you're sitting there and dings are going off all around you. You might as well get what information you can get out of it. And then I'll be, looking at my wind speeds. I'll have kind of maybe a rough idea of like, okay, maybe I think this target is like 400 or 500 yards, somewhere in there. And then I can get my arm board out and look like, okay, it's a 10 to 12 mile an hour wind that I'm getting. I can look, all right, 400 to 700 yards for a 10 mile an hour wind is, this wind hold. So, I'm probably going to be kind of somewhere in there once I get up there. And then you get up and start working through and you find your targets. So this is where I'm a big numbers guy and I like to math and I like to be able to use proven data and information to give me the highest probability of a first round impact on that target. And so NRL rewards first round impacts greater than second round impacts, and you only get 2 shots per target. A first round impact is 2 points, and your second round impact is 1 point. So you're gaining an extra point when you can get on that target on that first shot. So I'll be gathering all this information the best I can, as the day is progressing. I'll know like what the wind has been doing, what direction it's been coming from. I'll be, taking these right before I get up there. And then I get on there. I've got my ranges. I know what the wind is doing. Now we got to make a wind call on the fly. This is where I do think a lot of people get hung up on like, well, I need to work on my wind calling skills, or like, these guys are pro wind callers. And yeah, there are a lot of guys that are very, very good at it. And there's guys that are way better at it than I am. but you can set yourself up for success pretty easily using some math and some basic numbers. So we're gonna get into it. This is not the end all be all. I get, especially like guys that were like previous military and stuff like that will kind of really hang their hat on this, and it does work very well. But knowing your gun number for what cartridge you're shooting in that setup is very helpful. I'm not going to say it is exact because it's not, but it will definitely help. So, what that means is, for simplistic terms, and I'm sure someone can explain this better than I can, but this is the way I'm going to say it. Your gun number is a specific mile an hour wind speed, so that at 300 yards, you're going to hold 3/10. At 400 yards, it's going to be 4/10. 500 yards, it's going to be 5/10. 600, 700, so on. And you can generally get a wind speed that will equate to pretty close to 1,000 yards. It may kind of start washing off or not being exactly accurate, 800, 900, 1,000, depending on what you're shooting and what that number is. Um, so what that means is the lower the number is, it means it's going to take less wind to move it that distance. Where the number is bigger, it's going to take more wind for you to have to hold that same hold at that distance. So most Creedmoors, stuff like that, it's going to be like a 6 mile an hour, somewhere right in there. There's a good wind compass rose. It's been on Sniper's Hide and on the internet forever, but I do highly recommend people downloading it, saving it, maybe printing it off, laminating it, keeping it in your backpack, something like that. But what it's going to show you is if you have a direct, 100% head-on wind, it's going to be a zero effect on that wind because it's coming straight at you. There's no horizontal movement in that. From a direct 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, that is 100%. That's a full value wind. And then it will show you the percentages for like 1231, 132, so on. So, like a 230 wind, and don't hold me these numbers because I don't have it exactly in front of me, but 230 wind is like 96% crosswind value. A 2 o'clock is like 91%. 130 is roughly 75%. A 1 o'clock is roughly a 50%, and a 1230 is roughly a 25%. And so when you can memorize those numbers in your head based off of the direction of the wind, and this is where I say like this system can work very efficiently, but there is a lot of rounding and estimation and some things like that. So it's not a like foolproof plan, but it is very close. So, and like I said, this is how I do it. If it doesn't make sense to you, that's fine. Maybe you can find another solution for yourself. But I'm going to simplify all of these numbers for this scenario just so it's easier to keep up with. But let's say we have a 5 mile an hour gun and we've got a 10 mile an hour wind. Okay. So let's say we find a target at 600 yards. So we know with a full value wind, if it was a 5 mile an hour wind at 600 yards, we would have to hold 6/10 of wind. Since it is a 10 mile an hour wind, we double it. So it is a 1.2 mil wind hold. Pretty self explanatory. If it's a full value wind, wham bam, you're done. Send 1, 2, and you're good. Now, that's not always the case, obviously. So let's say we've got a same 10 mile an hour wind, but it's coming from a 130 instead of a 3 o'clock. Now we've got about a 75% wind value, crosswind value affecting that bullet. Okay. So we know from the previous example at 600 yards with a 5 mile an hour gun and a 10 mile an hour wind, we've got a 1.2 wind hold. Now we've got it coming from 130. We got 75% of that. What is that? It's a 0.9. Okay. So you've got a 0.9 wind hold. Bam. Good to go. So you can start working that, working those quick math numbers in your head and getting you on target relatively easily. Now, that's a very simplified case, it rarely ever works out that way, but it can be a close enough kind of thing. And so, like, for example, say like say you have a 7-mile-an-hour gun and you've got a 9-mile-an-hour wind coming from 1 o'clock at 500 yards. So if it was a 7-mile-an-hour wind at 500 yards, we would know we need 5/10. So at a 9 mile an hour, we've got, and this is literally kind of how I think of this. So it's rough, but I am, if I hear, 7-mile an hour gun, 9-mile an hour wind, I go, okay, it's that plus a little. So at 500 yards, I'm gonna say, okay, it should, it's gonna be a little bit more than a 5/10 hold, 5/10 plus a little bit, we'll call it 6/10. Now, that may sound very crude and a very rough guess, and it is, but a going from a 5/10 hold to a 6/10 hold is a 20% increase, and a 20% increase of a 7-mile an hour wind would be an 8.4 mile an hour winds, and we're at 9. So we are within half a mile an hour wind, and then so we've got a 6/10 hold, and then we're gonna go to a 1 o'clock, and that's a 50% wind value. So bam, we've got a 3/10 hold. So you can do the math, and even with some rounding and some estimations and stuff like that, it will get you. I mean, I would be willing to bet that wind hold would be within probably half a tenth one way or the other. So it can get you very, very close. And that's what I like to do most of the time when I'm trying to make that initial wind call. Now, that's all well and good if we know exactly where the wind is coming from, and it's holding at the same speed the whole time. But out here, in a lot of places, that's not always the case. So, and I don't want to get into a bunch of numbers because no one's gonna be able to follow it listening to this. But to give you how to work through that, say, and let's just leave it at a full value wind for simplicity's sake. And say we've got again a 5-mile an hour gun, but it's gusting from 10 to 15, and let's just say 1,000 yards for easy. So then we know we got a mil and a half of wind on this target. Okay. So that's good information to have. We know kind of what our minimum wind hold is going to be and what our maximum wind hold is going to be. We're lightest wind is going to be a mil up to a mil and a half. So then get down on the gun, and all of our scopes have reticles in them. Those reticles are measuring devices. They're angular units of measure, whether you're using MOA or mils. I like mils because a lot of these like simple tricks and stuff that I'm talking about, and the numbers are smaller and simpler and all that. But it is a ruler. It is right in front of your face. You have to stare through it at the target. You're using it to aim. Use it. So you can get that reticle onto your target. Okay. And say, I want to see if that 1 to 1.5 is going to work. So if I put 1 mil on the edge of the target and then I go over and look at where 1.5 is, well, is 1.5 inside the other edge of that target? If so, I'm gonna center that bracket right in the middle of that target and send it. That because I have done the math, and and set myself up, unless we get a crazy lull or a big gust that hasn't been happening, I should land on that target. Then from there, I can see where it hits on the target and make an adjustment, and I know what the wind is actually doing at that moment. So, say, you know, eh, obviously, the middle of 1 and 1.5 is 1.25. If I put 1.25 in the middle of that target and I hit, bam, dead middle of that target, I know we've got 12, 13 mile an hour wind. So then I can carry that on to the remaining targets, where, say I do that and it hits, the far left edge at that 1 mil mark. Well, I know the wind is kind of staying at the bottom of what it's been doing. So I don't need to hold as much wind as I did for the next target. And so I know it's a 10-mile an hour. So then let's say, I come down to, a 600-yard target. I don't want to hold that 12-mile an hour wind, 'cause, because it, may put me off the edge. And so, hopefully that can help, but you can use math and probability to set yourself up for the best chance of a first round impact on that target. And then based on how, how you are as a shooter and what your setup is, if you can see that impact well enough, then you can, and then again, pro tip, use that freaking ruler that's in your reticle, put that on your impact mark of where you hit on that target and measure to center. And you know how much you would have needed to correct to be back at the center of that target. And then just keep correlating that information target to target as you work through. And it's gonna really help set you up for success. And I know that's a lot of numbers and thinking on the clock, and look, if you're a new guy or like just an average dude that's wanting to come out and have fun and hang out and stuff like that, I get it. You probably don't have the reps like of doing this on the clock to be able to be running all of this through your head. I get it. Figure out a system that works for you, whether it be just, ranging, going off of your arm board, something like that. And that's why I like to run off my arm board too. Like it gives me something, like if my brain craps out and I can't think through the numbers, or they're too complicated, or there's too much going on, or I took too long to find the targets or whatever, I've got hard physical data that I can fall back on if I need to. So, but once and it's just reps. Like I know there's a lot of people that want, and I love new gear, and people want to think, well, hey, if I just buy this new scope, I'll do better. Or if I get this new cartridge, I'll do better. And yes, like these things all add up to build a efficient and good system. But if you, the shooter, can't do it and can't push that equipment to its limits, it's really not going to matter. So it's just reps and getting used to it. Honestly, one of the easiest things, especially for NRL, just practice getting your stuff out, because there's a lot of gear that you've got to be getting in and out for every stage. You've got to get your backpack off, you got to get your tripod out, you got to get your binos out, and if you've never done that before, I mean, it is a very simple thing, but it could take you 60 to 90 seconds just to get set up and start looking for something. Well, if you've got 4 minutes, well, you've already burned a minute and a half. You only leave yourself a minute, minute and a half to look for targets, and then you got to get on your gun and you're going to be pushing it pretty, to try and get through it. So if you just run, some reps of just, you got everything, backpack, you got everything, and run up, get it out, get your tripod out, get your bind, and you can just get some reps doing that, and you can get really quick doing that. And so what that does, and you can do that with getting your stuff out. You can do that with getting on your gun, building a position. Whatever the weak spot is in your game, you can work on a lot of this stuff without ever having to fire around, and just getting more efficient with your movements, getting quicker, and building better positions. And so, that all, as you get through this, the way I like to tell people is, when you're new, all of this, every single thing that you're doing, all the crap you got to manage on the clock, all the win calls, all the data, all that stuff, it's in your conscious mind. You're having like, you were literally thinking, all right, I'm gonna take my backpack off, now I'm getting my tripod out, now I'm getting my bag out, now I'm getting my binos out, okay, range, there it is, now I'm getting up on my gun, all right, I'm gonna put my bag here, I'm gonna put my rifle on it here, I'm gonna make sure it's steady, or I'm gonna check the level, make sure it's good. I'm a dial, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just the nature of the beast of being, newer into anything. You are consciously having to think through each and every step that you're doing while you're doing it. As you start getting progress through this, and you have more reps and you have more experience, it all starts to become more natural, and it starts slowly but surely working into your subconscious. And so, where you get so used to it, as you're running up and you get your stuff, you're not having to think about any of it. You know, so like, where what I'm doing is, like, when I get up to a stage, I'm scanning with my bare eyes. Like, I'll look where my limiters are, and then I'll look up and I'll just start scanning like crazy with my eyes, trying to find that first placard, while I'm getting all my stuff out. And I said that on this on the last episode, and that's another thing I see, especially new guys, when you're like, they'll set their backpack down, pull their tripod out, they're staring down at their backpack and settings like, guys, the ground is there. It ain't going anywhere. Look up. You can just rip your backpack open, stick your hand in there, grab your bag out and put it in. Like, you don't have to look at what you're doing. And it's buying you some time of being able to find this stuff. And so as you work through this stuff, getting your gear out, you're not really having to think about it and you can spend your brain power looking for targets. And then like when you get on your gun and building a position, you just know instantly, okay, well, this position is this height. I know how to build a position there. I know how to set up very rock solid that I can see everything. And you're thinking about, all right, this is what the wind is doing. This is how far it is. This is what my bracket's going to be. And so you're able to be thinking of this stuff that's going to help you have, better success on the stage versus having to think of what you have to do to get stable or something like that. So that's what if you're taking this seriously and you want to be competitive, that's one of the biggest things I can encourage is just reps on everything. And it takes some time. I mean, maybe I'm just dumb or an idiot. It took me a while of shooting competitively, PRS and NRL and all this stuff to get to that point. You might be able to do it a lot faster, or it might take you a little bit longer. But as you do that, that's where you can start freeing up that mental capacity and applying it to some of these other things that's gonna help. And then the biggest thing, and then as you're gathering this information, like I said, we're seeing where you hit on the target, or if you miss, measuring to what that is to the center. But then carrying all of that through, into the next target. So, like, say you have just 4 targets going out, 5, 6, 7, 800 or something like that, and you look at it and you estimate that you're gonna hold half a mil of wind on the first target, and you hit it. Then you go to the next one. Well, I'm gonna hold 5 mil or half a mil again because it worked. Cool, maybe you hit that one. Then you go to the next one, crap, now I hit off the edge. Well, like, you have to start correlating the information that the target is giving you and then adding and subtracting wind based on distance and angle of what you're moving through and using that math and stuff like that. So, but take and use all of the information that target gives you and carry it on to the next one. Then getting into like building positions, and I'm not going to go over, all the different stuff, but get get where you can build a stable position essentially at any height. Positional shooting, that's all it is. It doesn't matter if you're shooting off a rock, a tree, a truck, whatever, a fence, a T-post. It's just different heights. Whether it's standing, high kneeling, low kneeling, prone, in between. The in between prone and low kneeling is the hardest thing for everyone to get stable at. But that's really all you got to figure out is how to get stable at all these different heights. Where I like to give, especially NRL shooter tips. So in NRL, unlike PRS, we can't specifically tell you this is where you have to shoot. There will be a marked shooting position, but it doesn't mean that your bag has to be directly on top of that dot to shoot from. The rule is you have to be able to touch that dot, and that shooting position extends from the ground to the sky. And so all that means is say there's a branch, coming across that's 3 feet up and, it's marked right here. If there's nothing underneath it, you could lay prone because because shooting position goes from there to the ground and up. That mean, like, so you could set a tripod up over it and you could shoot over it. You could go underneath it, something like that. And so I'm going to use an example, and I know he's going to be so freaking mad at me because it pissed him off when I did this. But so Taylor Crabtree that runs, he's not like literally pissed. He was just like, man, Mike, why, da da da. And so like we're buddies. At Taylor's Freestone match last year, there was a stage that they had a John Deere Gator that was the prop to shoot off of. And the 2 shooting positions were the corners of the bed of that Gator. And it was intended and it was a little bit of an angle, but it was intended for you to shoot, put a bag on the back corner of that bed and shoot off of it, move forward to the next one and shoot off of that. Well, I knew that the rule was that I have to be able to touch the shooting position and it, extends, above and below. And so I just laid under the bed. I laid directly under that spot. And I mean, I have super long arms. So if they wanted to, I could have just reached up and touched it. But I'm following that rule and it goes and it extends to the ground. So I was directly underneath that dot, but I got to shoot prone and I was super rock solid versus guys having to, try and get a bag on a bed rail that's like an inch and a half thick and not super steady. And then I shot my two targets and then I just crawled up like 3 feet and laid directly underneath the next one. And so what I'm getting at with that is when you see these shooting positions, I'm going to do anything and everything I can to get prone because prone is going to be the most stable position that you can shoot in. And then the higher you go, the less stable it's going to be. So like a standing tripod or shot is going to be the least stable and then, kneeling will be pretty good and stuff like that. So that's the progression that I'm kind of working through as I see something, but then also, maybe the shooting position is, on a berm or whatever the case is, and you lay down exactly on top of it, but then you get in your scope and you look and there's, branches or a rock or something and the target slightly obscured. Well, then I can scoot like a foot or two to, the left or right, and I can still reach over and touch that shooting position and I'm still good and now I have a clear line of sight or there can be a myriad of reasons of why you may not be exactly on that, but it is something I do really enjoy about NRL because it rewards people that think on their feet and can kind of think outside the box, and when you can do that, and it's not like you'll be able to do it on every stage. A lot of them are pretty straightforward, and or match directors will set it up where, like, I our match, like if we want you to shoot off of a certain position, we build that stage where there's no other option. If you and if you can find something and outwit me, something that I didn't think of, like more power to you. I love it. It means you thought that through better than I did. But it will reward people that can think differently. And if you can find like that example that I did, if you can find somewhere that gets you prone versus having to shoot off of like something that's super narrow or wobbly or something like that, and you can clean that stage because you got prone versus, the next guy is wobbling a bunch and drops a couple of points. Well, you gained a couple of points on that guy just because you thought through the position a couple extra seconds or looked at it from a different angle or something like that. So don't always take something for face value when you see it. There can definitely be a couple of things that you can use to separate yourself a little bit. And then last thing, clock time management. For individual shooters, you get 4 minutes. For teams, you get 6 minutes. For shooting individuals and you have 4 minutes, you need to have a hard cutoff time so that no matter what, if you haven't found targets and it hits that time, you've got to get off glass, get on the gun and start shooting the stuff that you have found. If you don't and you keep wasting that time finding the targets, and then by the time you finally get on the gun, it doesn't matter that you found that last target because you're not even going to have time to shoot it. So this is gonna be a lot more of a personal thing based on the level of shooter that you're at and how fast of a shooter you are. Like I'm a very experienced shooter, but I wouldn't say I'm a fast shooter. I can move through things like very efficiently, but I'm not a fast guy. So like my hard cutoff, no matter what, is there's 90 seconds left. I've shot a ton of PRS. I can get 10 rounds off in 90 seconds with moving positions and dialing and stuff like that. I got to be moving and hustling, but I can do it. I don't like to leave it that close because if there's any kind of, if something happens, I didn't seat my mag or forget a landmark or whatever, then I've set myself up where I don't have enough time. But that may be 2 minutes for you. It may be two and a half. And it's also going to depend on what the stage type is, whether it's a one position, two position, or four position. If it's a one position and you've just got to, dial a few times, you can stretch that out a little bit more. But if it's a four position and there's, 30 or 40 yards between every position, you're going to need to leave some extra time and make sure you've got enough to get through all the different positions and targets. Generally, just a good like average rule of thumb, 2 minutes. You spend 2 minutes on glass, looking, ranging, trying to find stuff. And if you haven't found everything by then, it's okay. Just tell the RO, hey, I'm going to skip target 4, or skip targets 3 and 4, or whatever the case is, and get on your gun and start shooting. That way, you can at least get as many points as you possibly can while you're still on the clock. So I hope that helps. And then this is just a nicety more than anything, but make sure at the end of your stage, take 2 seconds out to thank your ROs. I've RO'd. I've also shot a lot of matches. In NRL, those guys get to shoot the whole match on Friday, which is a cool thing, and it's generally a lot of fun for those guys. But it is also a very long day because they got to shoot everything that you do all in one day. And so, they're waking up early. They probably get in Thursday night. They're showing up early Friday morning. They're shooting all day, 18 to 20 stages, finishing up at the very end of the day by the time you've probably already checked in, left, and eating dinner. And then they've got to go home, try and get a little bit of sleep, be back at the range before you get there so that they can pick up all the timers and tablets and go get to the stage and get set up and be ready by the time you get there. And then they got to sit there all day and answer all these questions and look at the same thing and, yell impact and re-engage on the same freaking targets. And there's always going to be someone that's an asshole to them. And, like it makes for a very long weekend, and those guys are there to make sure that you're safe and that you have fun and that you have the best match experience that you can. So just take an extra couple of seconds and tell them thank you for being there and that you appreciate them. And then when you find sponsor representatives that are there at the match, go find them and say thank you. These guys get hit up over and over and over. I get hit up all the time. It's exhausting, and there's matches all over the country, and there's more and more every year, and these guys are getting inundated. Tell them thank you. Tell them how much you appreciate them. If you pick something up off the prize table that company donated, send them an email, give them a call, tell them thank you, make a post, something like show some appreciation because these guys are there for you. They want you to have fun. They're trying to support you. They're trying to support the event, and it does not come at a small cost, like at all. So make sure you take a second to thank the sponsors that are there because none of these match directors could do it without them. And then go find the match director and tell them thank you. Putting on a match is a tremendous amount of work. A lot of people will try and ask for favors. Like it's exhausting. And so go tell them thanks. If there's something that you didn't like about the match, don't be a dick. Don't go up and be like, hey, dude, thanks for having me, but this match sucked. Like, don't do that. But, uh, you know, some match directors will send out surveys afterwards or something like that. You can give them feedback or, let them get through, the weekend. They've got 18 million things going on. And if you have something that is, genuine good input and maybe you have a solution or something like that, maybe give them a call. Like if you know them, give them a call, a week or two later and just be like, hey, dude, thanks for having me. It was cool. This one thing stood out to me that I wasn't just personally a big fan of. Don't call them and be like, "Hey, this thing sucked and this is why." Well, because I guarantee you somebody else liked it or something like that. Like go into it with some courtesy and some grace and stuff like that. But if a match director just always hear, "Oh yeah, the match was great. Thank you. I loved it." And then you show up the next year and because no one ever told them that something was wrong or that you didn't like it or whatever, and they do it again, well, you're like, "Oh, well, this is bullshit. I hated this last year they did it again." Well, you didn't, no one said anything. So, there is a good back and forth that can be had and where everybody gets the most out of, what we're spending money on and travel and all that fun stuff. So, but that's my my deep dive into NRL. I know this was a little bit of a more long-winded episode, and there's a lot of technical stuff in there, but if you need to break it up, or you can go back and listen to it or something like that. But I would love to hear your feedback on what you think about this, and if it helped or if I missed anything. I love the people that reached out after the last couple. I like it. It means a lot. I put a lot of work into this show, and I've been there's a lot of new stuff that will be coming out over the next handful of months. So I do really appreciate it. And I put a ton of effort into this. Let me know what you think. But guys, I love you guys. I appreciate y'all listening. I love doing this. I love the feedback. You guys are a ton of fun, and I do it for you guys. And it's awesome seeing the show grow. Go follow me on Instagram. It's the Mike Burtis on Instagram. Go follow the show. It's Red, White, and Moose on Instagram. The show's page is new, so we're trying to get that going. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming in the future. But guys, again, this show is brought to you by Alpha Munitions, Foundation, Collis, West Texas Ordnance, Hawken Precision, Lone Peak, Raven Rifles, and Botnia Solutions. Guys, go check them out. This is all the stuff that I use. I love you guys. I'll see you next week.